At the intersection of 72nd Street and Central Park West rises an imposing structure that defies logic in its existence. The Dakota embodies German Renaissance splendor, emerging from Manhattan's solid foundation. It spans 9 levels of elaborate brickwork and terracotta accents. Wrought iron gates secure the main archway entrance. Inside, 65 residences hide behind barriers substantial enough to block out external clamor. This stands as America's most renowned apartment house. As building work commenced in 1880, the press dubbed it Clark's Folly. The site resembled untamed land. Affluent households shunned such a northerly spot. The edifice was destined to remain vacant. This, skeptics argued, showed that Singer sewing machine riches couldn't trump location. History proved them mistaken. Over 140 years, the Dakota has endured countless challenges and weathered sorrows without yielding. Here's the tale of the residential complex that steadfastly thrived. In 1879, Manhattan's elite enclave stopped at 42nd Street. Past that boundary stretched raw countryside. The Upper West Side consisted of rugged ground, dotted with makeshift huts, roaming animals, absent utilities like gas pipes or water mains, and roads unfit for travel. That year, the elevated train line extended into the zone, yet riders gazed upon barrenness. Informal settlers erected flimsy shelters from discarded wood. Goats roamed freely amid protruding rocks. Come evening, the area plunged into blackness. No prosperous individuals called it home. The elite favored row houses in Murray Hill and Gramercy Park. They erected grand homes lining Fifth Avenue below Central Park. While the Upper East Side drew early builders, the park's west flank stayed pristine. Property costs mirrored this neglect. Parcels fetched mere slivers of midtown rates as purchasers envisioned no prospects. Edward Clark envisioned otherwise. At age 70 in 1879, he had amassed one of the nation's vastest wealths. The Singer Sewing Machine Company had enriched him enormously. His associate, Isaac Singer, passed in 1875, positioning Clark as the firm's leading figure. Singer devices reached global markets. The earnings were staggering. Clark already boasted achievements in New York property ventures. He had funded multiple thriving housing projects in prime areas. He grasped the appeal of communal dwellings, an idea still novel among affluent Americans. Continentals had embraced multi-unit homes for ages. New Yorkers resisted more cautiously. Detached townhomes symbolized the ideal for dignified households. Multifamily units evoked negative connotations tied to tenements and laborers. Yet Clark trusted the format could suit the upper class when done right. Spacious units boasting tall ceilings and contemporary features. Structures equipped with lifts to avoid stair climbing. Non-combustible materials for security. Exclusive zones mimicking side-by-side townhomes layered upward. He had supported various downtown examples. All flourished. His gaze now turned upward. Central Park unfolded progressively from 1858, finishing entirely by 1873. Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux reshaped 840 acres of craggy marsh into a verdant haven. The green space dazzled. Its west edge followed the future Central Park West, unnamed at the time, the route. Known as 8th Avenue north of 59th Street, amounted to little more than a dusty path. Clark acquired land at the juncture of 72nd Street and 8th Avenue. The lot extended 200 feet on 8th Avenue and 175 feet on 72nd Street. The cost struck as exceptionally modest for Manhattan. Vendors rejoiced at offloading Upper West Side holdings. The area's poor image hampered sales. Proper families dismissed it. Speculators foresaw slim gains. Clark engaged architect Henry Janeway Hardenberg. Then 33, he had just finished opulent Vanderbilt residences on Fifth Avenue. His education stressed durable builds and classic European motifs. He knew how to craft edifices evoking timelessness. Clark presented him with a demanding vision: fashion a high-end apartment house for a site devoid of upscale dwellers. Ensure it feels secure amid a rugged locale. Incorporate facilities warranting relocation to raw territory. Forge an element that sparks subsequent growth, not just joins it. Hardenberg selected German Renaissance revival as his motif. It pulled from 16th-century German designs: steep gables, intricate terracotta embellishments, robust stonework. This approach conveyed bastion-like resilience, tempered with refined ornamentation, ideal for a solitary outpost in a dubious district. The defensive quality proved essential. Occupants required a sense of shelter. The layout adopted a square-within-a-square configuration around an inner yard. The structure encircled an enclosed area, reachable solely via a supervised portal. 4 sections formed a safeguarding boundary. The yard supplied illumination and ventilation to inner suites, while fashioning an insulated enclave apart from nearby thoroughfares. Access to the structure would be regulated by an iron gate, with security checks required for every visitor. This residential project boasted an extraordinary scale, unprecedented in New York at the time, rising 9 stories high while typical structures barely reached 5 or 6 levels. Its base would occupy almost the full lot. Inside, it housed 65 units, varying from 4-room setups to expansive ones exceeding 20 rooms, with the biggest occupying whole floors. All residences featured lofty ceilings, sturdy walls, and up-to-date utilities. In 1880, Clark submitted the necessary building permits. The projected expense reached $2 million, a staggering figure. By contrast, constructing a prominent Manhattan townhouse usually ran between $50,000 and $100,000. Clark's outlay on this one edifice surpassed what many builders invested across multiple city blocks. Such a venture hinged on the area's evolution. If the Upper West Side stayed a rugged expanse, the endeavor would collapse dramatically. Had a reporter suggesting to Clark that he should be a reporter, had a reporter suggesting to Clark that he should construct out in Dakota territory instead, the vast, newly settled American frontier, far removed from New York's urban core. The moniker endured. Clark, it said, adopted it willingly, turning the critic's jab into the building's formal title. Groundbreaking occurred in October 1880 as laborers dug into the site's tough rock. Manhattan's bedrock surfaced shallowly in many spots, offering a stable base yet complicating the digging. Explosives were needed to flatten the ground and carve out the lower levels. The process proved noisy, intrusive, and drawn out. Local dwellers voiced their grievances, though few lived in the vicinity. Supplies rolled in via wagons and trains. Bricks from New Jersey kilns, bespoke terracotta details, iron girders for flame-resistant floors from Pennsylvania foundries, and timber for inner frameworks from northern state sawmills. Coordinating deliveries was intricate. 8th Avenue remained a dirt track where hefty carts gouged deep grooves. Storms transformed the area into a quagmire. The crew numbered 200 to 400, varying by stage, including expert bricklayers for ornate facades, metalworkers for the safety flooring, woodworkers for partitioning rooms, and general hands for shifting loads and tidying rubble. Progress persisted amid biting winters and sweltering summers. Sites like these in the 1880s posed grave hazards: plummets, pulverizing blows, and machinery mishaps that felled and crippled laborers with grim frequency. Safety protocols were non-existent. What distinguished the Dakota's blueprint were forward-thinking elements. Fire resistance was paramount given the blazes that routinely razed timber-framed buildings. Floors relied on iron supports and terracotta arches, with walls up to over 2 feet thick. Staircases were encased in stonework. A blaze in one unit couldn't readily leap to others. Affluent households, scarred by past calamities in lodgings and slums, deemed such safeguards a premium worth the price. Lifts were indispensable for a 9-story height. No one fancied constant stair climbing. 4 hydraulic versions, 1 per wing, would serve the needs. These water-powered mechanisms raised the cars more deliberately than future electric ones, but proved dependable. Their engines filled basement areas, drawing force from rooftop reservoirs. Though neighborhood electricity was absent, wiring was prepped for it. Gas initially handled illumination and stoves, yet Clark foresaw power's advent and ensured readiness with embedded pipes and outlets built in. Private baths in every unit marked a true indulgence in 1880, as countless city dwellings still depended on bedside vessels and privies. Plumbing demanded vast piping arrays, city water supplied when possible, backed by rooftop storage in shortages. Sewage routed to mains or pits is available. The Upper West Side's utilities lagged far behind. As the outer walls climbed, the inner yard emerged, about 100 feet on each side, to be surfaced and greened with foliage. Tenants could reach it directly from their sections, gaining not just ventilation and sunshine, but a secluded haven, free from urban clamor. Kids might frolic watched over, while grown-ups relaxed in peace. Throughout 1881 and into early 1882, Clark made frequent inspections of the site. Though past 70 and aged by era's measure, his vigor held. He conferred with Hardenberg and site managers on advancements, settling choices for finishes and specifics. This was his dream, his monetary gamble. Edward Clark passed away on April 14, 1882, in his Manhattan residence at age 73, with heart failure cited as the reason. Edward Clark had survived long enough to watch the Dakota's walls go up and its roof begin to form. But he didn't live to see the full project realized. Instead, his relatives took over the endeavor, inheriting both the unfinished structure and his substantial wealth. His son, Alfred Corning Clark, and grandson, Edward Severin Clark, stepped up to oversee the final stages of what their forebear had envisioned. They might easily have stopped the work altogether. The development was already drawing heavy criticism, and pushing forward demanded millions more in funding. Yet the family pressed on. Come October 1884, the Dakota stood complete. 4 years of building had turned Clark's bold, debated idea into a tangible landmark. 9 levels of brick and terracotta rose at 72nd Street and Central Park West. Elaborate gables topped the rooftop. Terracotta decorations showed faces, blooms, and abstract designs, while wrought iron balconies extended from the higher stories. It resembled a structure shipped straight from Germany, a Renaissance-style palace adapted into a New York apartment complex. The 72nd Street entryway spanned broad enough to accommodate horse-drawn carriages, leading into the inner courtyard. Wrought iron gates regulated entry. Right beyond them sat a porter's booth, allowing employees to keep watch over all arrivals. The arched passageway stretched about 40 feet under the building's foundation, before emerging into the open court. This tunnel formed a clear divide between the bustling street and the secluded enclave inside. The courtyard featured paved surfaces and landscaping. Over time, trees and oversized planters would offer cooling shade. Gas lights brightened the area after dark. All 4 sections of the building connected directly to the courtyard via doorways. Tenants could access their homes without ever stepping through public-facing entrances. This layout ensured a buffer from the nearby urban bustle. A resident would go through the gate, traverse the court, and head into their wing. The external chaos left firmly behind. Architect Henry Hardenberg had crafted the edifice with diverse apartment layouts to draw in various affluent households. The tiniest spaces included 4 rooms apiece. The grandest ones stretched over 20 rooms, claiming whole levels. Typical units landed in between, 8 to 12 rooms boasting lofty ceilings from 10 to 14 feet high, All came equipped with several bedrooms, an elegant dining area, receiving rooms for gatherings and areas for household staff. Inside, rich oak trim, intricate parquet flooring, ornate plasterwork on ceilings, and hearths in key spaces offered extra warmth. Every residence boasted its own full bathroom, a true extravagance back then. The fixtures represented cutting-edge tech for 1884. China commodes, coated metal tubs, and stone vanities. Warm water flowed from basement coal boilers. The water-powered lifts worked dependably, if not swiftly by modern measures. Separate shafts and mechanisms served each wing. Folks on the top levels relied on these for convenience. Scaling 7 or 8 sets of stairs simply wouldn't do for those paying top dollar for Dakota living. Beyond basics, the property offered innovative perks rare in such buildings. Downstairs held a communal dining hall for entertaining guests without cluttering personal quarters. In the cellar, a washroom managed linens and clothes for tenants lacking in-house help. Chilled chambers stored perishables long before household fridges became common. Plus, each flat got a dedicated basement locker for luggage and off-season belongings. Up top, the roof held surprises of its own. A section served as a croquet green, letting dwellers enjoy the game in warm months without venturing out. Plans for a tennis area surfaced, but went unrealized. The summit also contained plumbing setups, lift equipment enclosures, and coal-powered units that later supplied power. The Dakota welcomed its first tenants that October of 1884. The big, lingering doubt was straightforward. Would anybody truly take up residence? It loomed isolated in a raw, underdeveloped district. Major stores lay blocks distant. Travel options boiled down to the noisy, grimy, fickle, elevated train. Roads stayed rough and unlaid. Evenings brought shadows and possible threats. Early on, doubters found some validation as the place filled gradually. After 12 months, roughly 40% of the units had people. That sufficed for routine expenses, but left plenty vacant. Unrented spaces equaled missed earnings. The Clarks had sunk more than $2 million into it. Steady leases were essential to recoup that outlay, yet hitting 40% in the debut year outpaced the gloomiest forecasts. Pessimists figured it'd sit vacant forever. They thought prosperous New Yorkers would shun such an uptown spot. Luxuries be damned. But with scores of households opting in, it showed Clark's bold bet held real merit. As for the newcomers, the mix of occupants held an intriguing twist. Sure, elite clans from the Fifth Avenue crowd showed up in the records, but they got eclipsed by a different group altogether. Creative individuals like artists, musicians, composers, authors, and actors were drawn to the Dakota for several compelling factors. Compared to downtown options, the units offered generous room. Vaulted ceilings and sturdy partitions ensured good sound insulation. This allowed a composer to play piano energetically without bothering those nearby. Painters benefited from abundant daylight streaming through expansive windows. The site's relative seclusion turned into a plus, cutting down on social demands and interruptions, while the lease rates mirrored the pioneering vibe of the spot. A modest 4-room flat went for about $1,500 a year. Bigger, 12-room setups ranged from $3,000 to $4,000 annually. Such amounts undercut similar accommodations in more settled districts. This pricing offset the drawbacks of the position. Households open to Upper West Side life gained extra square footage at a bargain. A number of notable locals claimed units there, undeterred by the area's image. Prominent lawyer Theophilus Brower Woolsey relocated his household. Edward Seligman Clark, grandson of the original Edward Clark, kept a place in the building. Groups of German newcomers appreciated the structure's design, which felt reassuringly like home. Europeans, especially from Germany, adapted more readily to multi-unit dwellings than many U.S.-born folks. Running the complex demanded a sizable workforce. Individual suites had their own live-in help, housed on the top levels. Yet the property as a whole required personnel, too. Gatekeepers at the road and garden entrances, mechanics for the heating and lifts, janitors for shared spaces, and gardeners for the inner garden beds. In colder months, staff cleared pathways of snow at the front and yard. The Dakota's performance would dictate the area's growth trajectory. Persistent vacancies could scare off builders from investing. Few would gamble on upscale homes where demand seemed shaky. Conversely, full tenancy and solid income would indicate potential. It served as a pilot project. Come 1886, residents topped 60%. Momentum built steadily. Buzz grew in artistic circles regarding the perks. Roomy layouts, budget-friendly fees, noise-blocking barriers for seclusion, and a vibe that sparked inspiration. Additional instrumentalists and visual artists settled in. The Dakota carved out an identity separate from standard elite homes. Beyond mere shelter, it evolved into a hub for artistic creation. Change unfolded quicker than anticipated. In 1890, it neared capacity. The edifice derided by skeptics half a decade prior now demonstrated economic soundness. Even more vital, it started influencing its surroundings. Rival builders observed, if affluent renters embraced Upper West Side pads, profits awaited. The overhead train line, extended here in 1879, offered vital connectivity. The 9th Avenue line stretched up from downtown, stopping at 72nd Street, mere blocks away. Though the journey was bumpy, noisy, and sooty from coal-fired engines belching fumes and ash, it enabled travel. Professionals could reside northward and hit downtown workplaces in less than 60 minutes. Such reach proved essential. Upgrades to services sped up in the 1890s. Officials resurfaced roads. Gas conduits pushed northward. Hydrants supplied steady flow to the Upper West Side. Drains supplanted pits. Wiring for electricity spread as utilities grew. The untamed expanse of 1880 swiftly turned into a refined cityscape. The Dakota had pioneered ahead of its time. Gradually, the locale aligned with it. Fresh residential towers emerged close by during the 1890s and into the 1900s. The San Remo, the El Dorado, the Kenilworth. Constructors borrowed from the Dakota's blueprint but infused personal touches. Vast units, lofty heights, garden-centered plans, imposing portals. The Upper West Side emerged as a dedicated rental zone, unlike the row house vibe of the Upper East Side. Structures embodied this shift. Bigger, flashier designs that boldly stood out. The park's west flank shifted from raw frontier to elite enclave. Households eyeing Fifth Avenue turned westward. Views across the green matched any to the east. Units tended to sprawl more generously. Fees lingered a touch below East Side equivalents, even as the spread shrank. The Dakota validated demand. Its tenant mix kept leaning toward innovators. Composers especially thrived there. The mix of ample area, quieting features, and peer network fostered ideal conditions for composing. Prominent musicians continued to hold residences in the building well into the 1890s and beyond the turn of the century. It gained a strong standing as a haven for dedicated artists to reside and create. This allure drew in even more creatives, solidifying the established trend. Ongoing care was needed for the structure's physical integrity. After Edward Clark's passing, his family kept control and poured resources into preservation and enhancements. The initial gas illumination systems were augmented and ultimately swapped for electricity once it became dependably accessible. Hydraulic lifts underwent regular refurbishments to ensure reliable safety. Turned into a landmark feature. Traversing turned into a landmark feature. Traversing the base level via iron barriers and the porter's post formed a striking entry point. Reaching the Dakota involved stepping through this portal into a safeguarded realm. The deliberate drama of the approach was by design. Hardenberg recognized that the manner of entering influenced one's overall perception of the space. The Dakota's gateway signaled a departure from the everyday urban bustle. Encircling three sides, the dry moat fulfilled utilitarian and emblematic roles. This lowered zone allowed illumination and ventilation for lower-level windows, while also establishing a tangible divide from the roadway. Positioned a bit elevated on its site and enclosed by the moat, plus the overhead wrought iron railing, the Dakota stood somewhat removed. The bastion-like facade, once viewed as overly cautious back in 1884, now appeared wisely protective. Personnel were vital to the daily functioning. Into the 1890s, the Dakota supported a staff of many in diverse positions: doormen, lift attendants, porters, repair crews, and landscape tenders. Residents in each unit hired their own household help as well. A standard 12-room suite could include a chef, housekeeper, and valet, quartered in the upper-level service areas. Affluent households took such support for granted. The layout incorporated dedicated backstairs for staff, rear corridors, and isolated quarters away from main living zones. The Dakota's achievements confirmed key beliefs held by Edward Clark. Affluent Manhattanites would embrace high-rise residences, provided they were spacious and luxurious enough to mimic standalone houses. Proximity to the heart of the city proved less critical than expected if the property supplied ample facilities and excellence. The Upper West Side's seclusion was short-lived. Utilities and growth caught up, aligning with Clark's foresight. He passed away in 1882, so he missed seeing his ideas bear fruit. Between 1890 and 1900, the area's prestige surged. Former wilderness turned upscale, drawing elite households who once dismissed the Upper West Side in 1880, but now deemed it suitable. Once underway, the shift unfolded rapidly. Construction boomed. Additional residential towers emerged. Stores sprang up to cater to the expanding populace. Dining spots multiplied. The essentials of city living took hold. As nearby structures proliferated, the Dakota's design stood out more sharply. Hardenberg's German Renaissance style set it apart on the Upper West Side. Neighbors adopted Beaux-Arts, Renaissance Revival, or mixed motifs, yet none resembled the Dakota closely. The steep gables, intricate terracotta ornamentation, and imposing bulk rendered it unmistakable. Even as the district grew crowded, the Dakota retained its commanding presence. Henry Hardenberg later crafted other landmark New York properties, including the Plaza Hotel, unveiled in 1907. His stature as an architect was firmly set. The Dakota marked one of his first big jobs, a demanding endeavor in a risky spot. Its triumph boosted his profile among top designers. It showcased his skill in producing practical yet elegantly crafted edifices. By 1900, the Dakota had shed its trial status. It stood as a proven, prosperous apartment house in a vibrant community. Early doubts faded away. What skeptics called Clark's blunder evolved into his triumph. The project illustrated how daring property ventures could redefine whole areas. The Upper West Side's progress owed its start to the Dakota. All subsequent advances linked back to Edward Clark's resolve to construct amid hesitation. The risk had yielded rewards. Into the early 1900s, the Dakota underwent shifts beyond mere rises in tenancy. Its essence shifted alongside New York's broader changes. The cluster of artists from the 1890s grew richer and broader. Additional composers, visual artists, and authors selected it deliberately due to the existing creative residents. The Dakota emerged as a nucleus for innovation, where musicians connected with partners and artists discovered patrons. The connections among residents extended far past the mere walls of their homes. In the early 1900s, Theodore Steinway took up residence in the Dakota, bringing with him the prestige of his family's globally acclaimed piano firm. This move bolstered the structure's standing as a haven for music, allowing performers to share space with the creator of the instruments they cherished on stage. Though Steinway didn't directly shape their professional paths, the symbolic link carried weight. The robust build with its sturdy walls proved ideal for composers. A violin player could rehearse endlessly, without bothering those next door, and a pianist might labor deep into the evening. Hardenberg's use of massive stonework ensured vital soundproofing, crucial for dedicated artistic pursuits. Otherwise, flimsy barriers would have driven musicians away. Throughout the century's initial decades, notable orchestra leaders kept suites in the Dakota, drawn by its nearness to what would become Lincoln Center's early venues and the vibrant creative vibe of the Upper West Side. The surrounding area was building up its art scene, complete with performance halls, practice rooms, and conservatories. Thus, the Dakota positioned itself as the heart of Manhattan's budding classical music enclave. Ownership of the property shifted among the Clark descendants and their estates over time. The founding Edward Clark passed away in 1882, followed by his son Alfred in 1896. Then grandson, Edward Severn Clark, oversaw it until 1933. Generation after generation upheld its excellence, recognizing its worth not only in dollars but in cultural significance. By then, the Dakota stood as a cornerstone of New York life, and neglect would mean forsaking a cherished heritage. Upkeep demanded ongoing investment. Roofs got patched regularly, elevators underwent frequent tune-ups, and plumbing issues had to be fixed promptly. The inner garden called for skilled horticulturists, while the wrought iron entrances and ornate fixtures required fresh coats of paint against corrosion. Terracotta details sometimes fractured, needing careful restoration. Running such a grand and intricate edifice racked up thousands in monthly bills, full occupancy notwithstanding. Finances grew trickier with climbing taxes and escalating upkeep costs. Come the 1920s, the rental setup that had thrived since the 1880s started to falter, with revenues that previously exceeded outlays now just scraping by. The Clark family foundations, which held sway over the Dakota, started weighing other paths forward. Shifting to a co-op structure surfaced as an option. If dwellers bought their units instead of leasing, they'd shoulder repair bills firsthand, freeing the family to offload the asset, recoup funds, and bow out of property oversight. Co-op models were still fresh in New York City, though a few conversions had succeeded elsewhere. Under this system, occupants bought stock in a company that held title to the whole building, earning exclusive use of designated spaces. That entity then levied ongoing dues for all communal costs, blending personal equity with unified administration. Turning a leased property into a co-op meant persuading renters to switch to ownership. At the Dakota, talks kicked off in the late 1920s, but hit a wall amid the Great Depression as markets tanked and purchases dried up. Leases dropped too, with some folks unable to keep up payments. The place stayed on the rental track into the 1930s, awaiting brighter times. Those lean Depression periods challenged the building's ledger. Empty units multiplied as households tightened belts, prompting the Clark trusts to slash rates over risking full vacancies. Keeping folks housed and core bills paid took priority over gains, with family fortunes softening the blow. Plenty of other owners in the same bind cut corners or dumped holdings at a discount, but the Dakota held its polish thanks to the Clarks' ability to weather temporary hits. World War II ushered in fresh hurdles. Young tenants shipped out to serve, while citywide housing crunches spiked needs yet stressed worn systems. Wartime limits hampered supply for fixes, so the structure endured the conflict intact, but with piling repair backlogs. Peace ushered in major upgrades at last. The boom after the war revived co-op chatter. As markets rebounded, asset prices climbed, and long-term inhabitants regained solid footing after years of hardship and conflict. A growing number of residents preferred buying their units over keeping up with leases. The era's atmosphere increasingly viewed owning a home as a symbol of achievement and stability, transforming the Dakota into a co-op fit right into these wider societal changes. This shift took place in 1961 with the establishment of the Dakota Apartments Corporation. Current occupants got the chance to buy shares tied to their specific units. The majority took the offer. However, a few long-term dwellers unable to cover the costs or uninterested in the duties of ownership decided to leave. Fresh buyers snapped up those empty spaces. In just 2 years, the process wrapped up for the most part. The Dakota had become a resident-owned cooperative, free from control by the Clark family descendants. This setup demanded structured oversight. Shareholders voted in a board of directors to handle operations, upkeep schedules, and, crucially, vetting newcomers. Whenever a unit came up for sale or passed down through inheritance, the board scrutinized applicants. They checked if candidates had the funds for the asking price, plus ongoing fees. Beyond money, they gauged if the person would blend with the building's vibe and traditions. Such vetting handed the board considerable influence on the Dakota's community makeup. Over time, it earned a name for tough criteria. Hopefuls required deep pockets. An unofficial rule surfaced. Buyers ought to hold cash reserves worth multiples of the unit's cost. Upkeep charges ran steep, often hitting thousands per month. Incoming residents had to show earnings that could easily handle those bills. The monetary threshold was intentionally elevated to ensure dwellers could shoulder the property's costs without hassle. Vetting also weighed softer elements. Sparked backlash. Denied hopefuls argued that choices stemmed from bias or whims. The board countered that they were safeguarding the edifice's future and the current inhabitants' well-being. Rumors swirled of famous figures getting the boot, like Cher reportedly being denied. Accounts also pointed to Billy Joel facing rejection. Official explanations stayed private, yet guesses included fears over safety risks, press scrutiny, or incompatible habits. Debates linger on whether these snubs truly occurred, but the tales cemented the Dakota's aura of elitism. No amount of riches or stardom guaranteed entry. The 1961 co-op switch signaled a key evolution. The property's atmosphere started evolving in quiet yet clear ways. Under rentals, turnover flowed freely. Folks arrived, stayed a while, then departed with life's twists. Ownership fostered commitment. Share buyers planned to stick around, having sunk serious money in. Relocating involved fees and board hurdles anew. This led to a steadier, more rooted group with far less churn. The 1960s ushered the Dakota into heightened fame within art circles. It had long drawn creators and performers, yet now it pulled in top-tier stars from showbiz and culture. The mix of standout design, prime Upper West Side spot, roomy units, and co-op selectiveness drew those seeking seclusion and status. Ironically, the board's rigorous checks boosted its allure. Tales of turndowns amplified the allure of mystery. Earning a spot signified clearing a hurdle many couldn't. Lauren Bacall snagged a unit in the mid-1960s. The iconic performer and Humphrey Bogart's widow sought a Manhattan outpost after decades in California. She picked the Dakota for its striking look and seclusion. Solid walls muffled any eavesdropping by photographers. The secure portal barred intruders. It offered protection subtly, not like a bunker. Bacall turned into one of the Dakota's standout figures, holding on to her place for years. Leonard Bernstein settled in during the late 1960s. The esteemed writer and maestro Then leading the New York Philharmonic was riding high. He acquired a spacious unit suited for a grand piano and creative work. Endured. In the early 1970s, Roberta endured. In the early 1970s, Roberta Flack, the celebrated Grammy-winning singer and pianist, secured an apartment at the Dakota. She cherished the structure's superior sound qualities and the thriving circle of artists within it. Being surrounded by fellow musicians and creatives fostered a setting that truly appreciated and honored innovative pursuits. Local residents never minded the sounds of her piano sessions or her extended late-evening recordings. The overall ethos there encouraged artistic endeavors instead of obstructing them. Rudolf Nerf, the Soviet ballet dancer who had fled to the West, kept a residence in the Dakota. Its cosmopolitan architectural style drew him in. The German Renaissance aesthetics evoked a sense of Europe that most standard U.S. apartment complexes lacked. Nerf prized that timeless continental charm. Additionally, he valued the seclusion and safeguards the property offered. As a prominent defector, he dealt with real threats to his well-being. Lingered near the front door. Lingered near the front door. Eager for shots of tenants. Couriers faced more rigorous security measures. The governing board reacted by enhancing entry restrictions. Doormen were directed to closely examine all visitors. Nobody entered via the iconic arch without valid reasons for being inside. Back in 1968, Roman Polanski shot Rosemary's Baby, featuring the Dakota's facade. This chilling psychological thriller cast Mia Farrow as a newlywed in a vintage Manhattan high-rise, growing suspicious that her fellow tenants form a devil-worshipping group. Though interior scenes weren't filmed on site. The outer views firmly positioned the building as the narrative's backdrop. The picture earned praise from critics and strong box office returns. It exposed the Dakota to countless film enthusiasts unfamiliar with it before. The production forged a lasting link between the edifice and eerie Gothic tales that endured over the years. Elements like its castle-esque silhouette, shadowy portal, and elaborate Victorian flourishes lent a foreboding vibe to the visuals. Polanski leveraged the design to build tension. The Dakota appeared as the sort of spot where sinister events could unfold in hidden corners. This portrayal wasn't always welcome among inhabitants, yet it rendered the landmark universally identifiable. The movie also sparked city folklore. Rumors spread of ghostly presences, concealed corridors within the structure, and enigmatic fatalities. The majority stemmed from cinematic invention, rather than the site's true past. Still, such tales wove into the Dakota's enduring lore. Visitors started showing up, snapping pics of the gateway and hoping for celebrity sightings. Management and dwellers put up with the scrutiny, but avoided promoting it. In 1969, the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission granted the Dakota official landmark status. This acknowledged its standout design and cultural legacy. It further required approvals for any outer alterations. The Co-op's Oversight Committee couldn't tweak the frontage, adjust the rooftop profile, or tamper with stylistic features without clearance. While the status shielded against unsuitable updates, it also curbed the board's flexibility. Tensions sometimes arose between safeguarding heritage and owning rights. The protected designation boosted the building's societal prominence. It likewise piqued interest from design scholars, conservation advocates, and city development experts. The Dakota emerged as an example of preserving upscale residences for contemporary needs while upholding their core essence. The Upper West Side evolved steadily during the 1960s and 1970s. Lincoln Center debuted in the mid-1960s, introducing key arts venues to the area. Institutions like the Metropolitan Opera, New York Philharmonic, and New York City Ballet shifted to the fresh hub. Positioned mere blocks away, the Dakota offered easy access for artists and stage performers. The vibrant scene that Edward Clark envisioned back in 1880 came to full bloom almost 100 years on. Upkeep expenses for the building kept climbing. Under the co-op model, owners shouldered these via ongoing maintenance charges. Into the early 1970s, fees for spacious units hit thousands per month. These funded personnel pay, energy bills, fixes, coverage, levies, and upgrades. Though the board stewarded funds prudently, they couldn't halt escalations from economic pressures and the city's surging wage demands. The board's vetting for new applicants grew even more rigorous. As construction costs climbed, the financial demands on buyers grew steeper. The board sought out occupants who could easily cover upkeep charges without any financial burden. They also prioritized individuals committed to keeping their homes in top condition. If interiors fell into disrepair, it would lead to costly fixes that ultimately fell on the co-op's shoulders. Over time, the board started treating the sale of units as a chance to handpick tenants who would add value, rather than create problems. Detractors claimed the vetting procedure had grown overly rigid, fostering an atmosphere of undue elitism. Defenders pointed out that co-op boards held the legal authority and real-world need to scrutinize potential buyers thoroughly. After all, the structure's enduring fiscal stability hinged on owners who settled fees on time and cared for their spaces diligently. Such vigilance, they maintained, safeguarded the stakes of all involved. By the 1960s and into the 1970s, the Dakota's image shifted from a venerable vintage edifice to a beacon of culture. Its blend of historic landmark designation, star-studded tenancy, the notoriety from Rosemary's Baby, and the board's selectivity wove a legend that reached well beyond Manhattan's property scene. The place gained renown, not merely for its physical form, but for the ideals it embodied. Vestiges of classic New York fortunes, creative triumphs, design heritage, and elite seclusion, all captured within 9 levels of brick and terracotta. The Dakota transcended its role as mere housing. It stood as an emblem. That spring in 1973, Yoko Ono stepped through the Dakota's arched gateway in search of a home. She had wearied of hotel stays and fleeting lodgings. A stable spot in New York beckoned. Several factors drew her to the Dakota. Its aura of creativity resonated with her roots as an avant-garde artist. The robust security and seclusion were vital, while the very design, the imposing castle-like facade and shielded inner garden, hinted at refuge. She discovered exactly what she sought. Apartment 72 spanned 7 rooms on the 7th floor. Though not the grandest in the complex, it offered generous proportions. Vaulted ceilings, sturdy partitions, and courtyard views defined the space. It required updates, yet the framework was solid. Yoko submitted a bid. The board examined her candidacy. Her wealth met the criteria. Her artistic pedigree shone without flaw. They greenlit the deal. Yoko's spouse, John Lennon, was at first lukewarm toward the Dakota. He deemed it shadowy and oppressive. The Gothic style evoked chilling movies for him. Yet, Yoko persisted. She saw the edifice's shielding attributes as indispensable. The pair had endured stalking, dangers, and relentless press-hounding. Few Manhattan spots rivaled the Dakota's safeguards. Lennon came around in time. They snapped up the unit for about $150,000. In those days, that sum felt steep, but hardly extravagant for city properties. Come summer 1973, they settled in. Workmen pressed on with overhauls amid their occupancy. They brought in designers and builders to reshape layouts, modernize plumbing and wiring, and craft the nest they dreamed of. Lennon warmed to the Dakota, lingering there more and begrudging the relocation less. Its merits revealed themselves. Insulation muffled sounds superbly. Staff at the entrance were courteous, yet vigilant. Fellow dwellers honored boundaries. No intrusions marred the garden or corridors. Lenin and Ono snapped up extra units whenever they surfaced. In the end, they controlled 5 distinct spaces. One served as their sleeping quarters, another as Lenin's creative workshop, a third for visitors, a fourth for professional dealings, and the last for archiving items. This growth underscored their prosperity and dedication to the Dakota as their enduring base. They weren't simply residing there. They were establishing deep ties. The structure turned into Lenin's haven from the spotlight. Following the frenzy of Beatlemania, the fervent protests of the late 1960s, and the drawn-out visa struggles with U.S. authorities in the early 1970s, Lenin yearned for everyday family routines. The Dakota enabled that. He could stroll to Central Park alongside his son Sean. He could pick up loaves from neighborhood bakeries. He could simply be John Lennon, the man, not the legend. The area granted a measure of obscurity. Folks on the Upper West Side took celebrities in stride. They avoided fanfare. Lennon paused his musical pursuits for 5 years from 1975 onward, devoting himself to parenting Sean, born that October. He embraced the role of stay-at-home dad, as he called it. He kneaded dough for loaves, prepared dinners, oversaw the home front as Yoko managed their ventures. The Dakota's ample floor plan suited this serene existence. The cooking area allowed for ambitious prep. Sean had plenty of space to roam and play. The structure of the building ensured that Lennon could prioritize his family without worrying about unwanted interruptions. Between 1975 and 1980, these years marked the calmest phase of Lennon's maturity. He avoided tours, album sessions, and media disputes, opting instead for a straightforward existence at the Dakota alongside his loved ones. Local residents might spot him in the courtyard or on the elevator from time to time. He remained approachable, yet cautious. The people of the Dakota respected the unspoken code. No harassing well-known figures, no requests for signatures. Just regard them as ordinary tenants, not stars. In 1980, Lennon began working on music once more. Together with Yoko, they crafted the album Double Fantasy, which came out in November. This release signaled his comeback to the spotlight after a break, focused on home life. Early critiques were varied, yet it achieved strong sales. During promotions, Lennon shared thoughts on his role as a stay-at-home dad, his commitment to Sean, and his satisfaction with everyday routines at the Dakota. He openly referred to the place as his true residence. The front entrance wove into Lennon's everyday habits. It involved the 72nd Street archway, the passageway beneath the structure, and the inner courtyard. He navigated this path several times each day, for strolls in Central Park, trips to the studio, or local shopping. That entryway served as a boundary between the outside world and his personal sanctuary. The Dakota's architecture intentionally established such a divide. Tenants moved from exposure to seclusion with a distinct shift. On December 8, 1980, in the evening, Lennon and Ono departed the Dakota heading to a studio appointment. Someone came up to them right by the doorway. Mark David Chapman had lingered there all day. Lennon had even autographed something for him earlier. This time, Chapman stayed silent. Lennon and Ono climbed into their limo and drove off. They came back to the Dakota near 10:50 p.m. The vehicle stopped at the 72nd Street entrance. Emerging with session tapes in hand, they headed toward the archway. Chapman hadn't moved. He shouted Lennon's name. As Lennon looked back, Chapman pulled the trigger 5 times with a handgun. 4 rounds hit Lennon in the back and shoulder. He lurched ahead into the archway and the building's vestibule. He fell near the doorman's desk. Officers reached the scene in moments. Rather than summoning paramedics, they rushed Lennon to Roosevelt Hospital. He passed away in the ER at 11:15 p.m. due to severe hemorrhaging from the injuries. Chapman stayed put. absorbed in a book of The Catcher in the Rye. Authorities took him into custody peacefully. Word raced through the building right away. Some tenants caught the gunfire, others got details from the staff. Soon after, groups started assembling on 72nd Street near the entrance. Admirers left blooms, lights, and snapshots. They performed Beatles tunes. They mourned openly. This impromptu tribute expanded as the night wore on. Come dawn, multitudes packed the pavement and roadway. The Dakota's doorway turned into the heart of worldwide sorrow. TV crews filmed the archway of his passing. Publications showed shots of the portal and the throng. The structure's Gothic lines surrounded scenes of lament. Yoko stayed within the Dakota confines. Yoko stayed within the Dakota confines. Security measures blocked journalists and onlookers from her unit. She issued a short plea for space. Management and personnel strove to keep things running smoothly amid the tenants' sorrow. A site always prizing discretion now drew intense international scrutiny. That spotlight lingered on. The killing forever altered how the public saw the Dakota. It was renowned already. Now it carried a darker notoriety. The spot of Lennon's death drew seekers from everywhere, eager to pause where he was struck. Over time, the city established Strawberry Fields, a tribute area in Central Park opposite the building. It drew off some visitors, but the edifice retained its status as a holy ground. Right after the slaying, safeguards evolved swiftly. Leaders reinforced entry rules. More doorkeepers joined the team. Monitoring devices went up. Guards at the gate grew stricter with checks. Even with the added hassle, dwellers endorsed the steps. The tragedy highlighted real dangers for prominent inhabitants. The place adapted out of necessity. Long a guardian, the Dakota now embodied fortification in every sense. Yoko Ono stayed put in the Dakota. She kept her residences there for the years after Lennon's death. The structure turned into her lifelong residence, the spot where she and Lennon had shared their days. It was there that Sean matured and their domestic routine played out. While other inhabitants might have deemed residing at the scene of the killing intolerable, Yoko remained. For her, the Dakota endured as a true sanctuary, even amid the sorrow tied to it. Her ongoing stay shaped the edifice's essence. As its most renowned occupant, she linked it to the Beatles' legacy and served as an enduring echo of the 1980 incident at the doorway. Incoming dwellers recognized that tenancy at the Dakota entailed embracing that past. The property's essence was forever bound to Lennon's demise. Visitors snapped pictures of the archway. Devotees placed bouquets on remembrance days. The site couldn't shake its status as both crime location and shrine. The governing committee managed such scrutiny with caution. They aimed to pay tribute to Lennon's legacy without reducing the place to solely his story. After all, the Dakota operated as a lively co-op housing numerous households in everyday routines. It was no place for an exhibit hall. Officials curbed guided tours and unsanctioned tributes. They directed the doorman to usher groups swiftly past the front. Above all, the focus stayed on it being a dwelling with heritage as a secondary note. Gradually, Yoko expanded her holdings, snapping up extra units past the original 5 she held with Lennon. Into the 2000s, accounts indicated she oversaw over 20 spaces within. Certain ones merged into broader quarters. The rest stayed as distinct pads for employees, archiving, or ventures. Such vast property interests positioned her among the top owners. That sway extended to shaping committee votes and operational guidelines. Post-Lennon's slaying, the co-op's vetting grew even more rigorous. Safety worries peaked. Officials sought tenants who avoided drawing risky scrutiny or sparking vulnerabilities. They favored those attuned to the site's distinct vibe and hurdles. Residing there involved tolerating steady onlookers on the street, press fascination with the locale, and the burden of its grim backstory. Such pressures tested mental resilience for many. The monetary bar for acquiring units stayed sky-high. Come the 1990s, flats fetched millions apiece. The grandest fetched beyond $10 million. Upkeep charges hit $5,000 to more than $15,000 monthly, scaling with scale. Buyers had to demonstrate capacity for the initial outlay, plus sustained expenses. Officials demanded reserves several-fold the sale amount. The threshold was intentionally steep, accessible mainly to elite Manhattanites. Tales of notable denials surfaced repeatedly. Gene Simmons from Kiss apparently sought entry and got rebuffed. Melanie Griffith and Antonio Banderas faced denial in certain reports. Carly Simon, a thriving artist with ample funds, still met refusal. The committee's motives stayed under wraps, though rumors pointed to concerns over habits, spotlight risks, or gut feelings about cultural mismatch. These snubs did more than enforce barriers. They bolstered the Dakota's aura of enigma. Securing clearance signified a singular, arduous triumph. Spurning big-name stars underscored that cash and stardom fell short. Some elusive trait was key. Its nature stayed nebulous by design. Maybe poise, reverence for legacy, or grasp of the site's singular spirit. Officials held the reins on those elusive standards. Still, some stars did secure spots and settle in. Maury Povich and Connie Chung snapped up a unit. Jason Rhodes called it home. Rex Reed kept quarters there. The appeal to showbiz types lingered, albeit less than its renown might suggest. The committee's pickiness tempered star density. They resisted letting it morph into a star-packed haven. That would erode the seclusion fueling its allure. Safeguarding the design stayed central. Its protected status barred outer changes without City Heritage Board okay. Yet inner upkeep mattered just as much. Officials urged owners to uphold vintage features like soaring vaults, parquet flooring, ornate molding, and oak trim. On sales, they scrutinized redo schemes. They nixed ideas harming period touches. The site's soul hinged on those relics enduring. Upkeep expenses kept climbing. Wages, utilities, coverage, levies, all surged without pause. The structure's vintage demanded non-stop fixes for its infrastructure. The lifts, first fitted in the 1880s with occasional upgrades, demanded regular upkeep. Pipes in the water system sprang leaks over time. Roofing fixes became necessary now and then. The terracotta decorations eroded with exposure and sometimes had to be swapped out. Landscaping in the inner courtyard called for expert tending. Running a structure over 140 years old proved costly, no matter the approach. Upholding it to upscale luxury levels drove expenses even higher. The co-op board levied periodic fees on owners to fund big structural upgrades. Swapping out every window across the property ran into millions of dollars. Overhauling the wiring involved massive labor. Refreshing the underground storage zones and utility areas carried hefty price tags. These levies tacked on thousands or even tens of thousands more to residents' standard monthly fees. Owners complained yet forked over the cash. They recognized that ongoing funding kept the place valuable and comfortable. Tales of apparitions lingered on. A few dwellers mentioned spotting Lennon's spirit wandering the corridors or garden area. Some insisted they caught echoes of his singing or felt his aura nearby. Such accounts likely stemmed from urban legends more than actual hauntings. Yet they wove into the Dakota's legendary lore. The edifice had starred in Rosemary's Baby, serving as a backdrop for eerie supernatural dread. Lennon's killing brought authentic sorrow to the mix. With that backdrop, spectral yarns felt all but unavoidable. The front archway stayed the property's prime photo magnet. Visitors clustered on 72nd Street, snapping shots of the very place where Lennon met his end. The Dakota had no sway over city sidewalks. Officials had laid out strawberry fields right opposite in Central Park as a formal tribute. Yet that failed to divert attention from the structure. The gateway popped up in endless pics, docs, broadcasts, and articles. Its striking look and deep historical ties made it unforgettable. Any press on Lenin-related matters invariably featured views of the Dakota's portal. Entering the 21st century, the Dakota had towered for more than 120 years. It had outlasted all the usual perils that doom old landmarks, recessions that ruined owners and sparked teardowns, urban growth pushes that morphed neighboring plots into sleek towers, shifting preferences that rendered Victorian designs passé. The structure persisted thanks to diligent oversight, historic safeguards, the co-op setup, and sheer luck. It didn't hurt that the units stayed in high demand. Folks clamored to call it home. Such steady interest covered the tab for upkeep. The Dakota's spot in New York's artistic scene felt rock solid. It cropped up in movies, books, and TV series. Design scholars dissected it. Conservationists pointed to it as a prime case of smart modernization. The Dakota showed how Gilded Age high-end residences could stay pertinent and pricey in today's Manhattan. The initial blueprint had been so astute and finely crafted that the building evolved with the times while holding on to its core essence. In the 2010s and 2020s, the Dakota essentially echoed its 1884 self, an elite co-op filled with affluent tenants who prized seclusion, design, and heritage. Its basic vibe endured through well over 130 years of shifts. It continued delivering spacious units boasting lofty ceilings and sturdy partitions. It kept drawing creatives like artists and performers mixed with corporate leaders and legacy cons. It upheld rigorous vetting by the co-op panel. The Dakota's endurance over a century plus marked its standout trait. Property prices mirrored its legendary appeal. Units seldom hit the market. When available, they fetched starting bids in the tens of millions. A typical unit went for $15 million back in 2015. Bigger ones pulled in $25 million by 2018. The priciest ever fetched north of $40 million in the early 2020s. Those figures captured not only general Manhattan rates, but the extra cachet of Dakota residency. Purchasers shelled out for the prestige, the backstory, the aesthetics, the elite vibe. The board kept turning away far more hopefuls than it greenlit. Money creds formed the entry bar. Folks ready to pay outright, sans forced folks ready to pay outright, sans forced asset sales or portfolio dumps. That hurdle alone weeded out the majority of suitors. Even high achievers pulling in $500,000 a year frequently fell short on the cash flow test. Past the dollars, the board probed personal traits and daily habits. Could the candidate keep the unit in top shape? Would they honor the co-op's norms and traditions? Might they spark safety issues or draw unwanted publicity? The board ran thorough vetting probes. They spoke with contacts for insights. The board scrutinized applicants' financial documents thoroughly. This evaluation often stretched over several months. A number of candidates pulled out prior to hearing outcomes, deeming the intense examination too burdensome. Among the existing occupants were a blend of celebrities from show business, high-level finance professionals, property developers, and long-standing family lineages that had held units across generations. Numerous dwellers had passed down their spaces from mothers, fathers, or even earlier forebears who acquired them amid the initial shift to co-op ownership. Such enduring households fostered stability, recalling the structure's past prior to Lenin's arrival, before it earned landmark status, back when it functioned merely as a sturdy vintage residential complex. Their deep-rooted knowledge safeguarded the Dakota's essence, elevating it above mere fame or visitor draw. Roughly 50 staff members kept things running, including door attendants, baggage handlers, repair crews, lift attendants, and guards. Many had served the Dakota for years on end. They grasped the intricacies of the infrastructure and the inhabitants' preferences. Employee retention stayed high thanks to competitive wages and union perks. The Dakotas, standing as a top-notch workplace, aided in keeping seasoned workers. This steadfastness proved essential, as veteran employees were intimately familiar with every nook and could nip issues in the bud. Tourists fixated on the iconic entrance arch, snapping photos of the portal tied to Lenin's tragic end. Daily by the score. On December 8th, throngs swelled to the hundreds. Devotees assembled to honor the killing's yearly milestone, crooning Beatles tunes, igniting votives, and depositing blooms. The edifice endured such assemblies, but confined them to public areas. The arch served as the divide between street access and the secluded inner yard. Symbolically and in reality, the entrance denoted that divide. Nearby strawberry fields in Central Park diverted some sightseers. Its famed Imagine mosaic circle served as a sanctioned spot for tributes to Lenin. Yet plenty of guests yearned to behold the genuine edifice of his residence and demise. No park homage could supplant the Dakota's stature as the true locale. It marked the precise spot where Lenin's existence concluded, a location's authenticity that defied relocation. Upkeep for the tangible framework demanded relentless effort. The brick exterior called for regular repointing to ensure durability. Ornate terracotta features eroded and sometimes fractured, necessitating skilled repairs. In the 2000s, the entire roof got a full overhaul, running into millions of dollars. Though the 1880s-era pipes had long since been swapped out, those updates were now showing their age and required further fixes. The core framework held firm, yet all additions atop it needed vigilant tending. The Co-op Council grappled with perpetual choices between upgrades and safeguarding heritage. Dwellers sought contemporary perks like rapid Wi-Fi, advanced HVAC, and enhanced safeguards. However, retrofitting a 140-year-old structure posed challenges. Threading wiring through robust stone barriers threatened harm to period elements. The council typically prioritized heritage amid tensions, valuing the site's timeless allure over any cutting-edge feature. During the 2000s, various units saw substantial overhauls. Officials examined every plan meticulously. They greenlit changes that honored foundational designs and accents, while weaving in current tech. Outright refusals met bids to strip out cores or erase period touches. The aim centered on adapting spaces for today's lifestyles, sans erasing their distinctive traits. Think soaring vaults, inlaid wood flooring, sculpted plaster, and sturdy oak trim, all untouchable by today's benchmarks. The edifice's energy performance lagged severely. Built before insulation norms, it featured heat-leaking single-glazed panes. While hefty stone barriers offered mass for temperature regulation, they lacked true barrier qualities. Utility bills for warmth and chill soared. Officials probed fixes yet hit barriers. Swapping in energy-efficient glass would shift the visual profile, demanding clearance from the landmark's body. Bolting on outer barriers wasn't viable. The Dakota could never align with current eco ratings. Inhabitants shrugged off steep energy tabs as inherent to the privilege. Yoko Ono endured as the site's standout figure well into her late 80s. She upheld her vast array of units and oversaw Lenin's legacy from within the Dakota. By the 2020s, her over 5-decade tenure forged a vital link to the building's latter 1900s saga. Fresh arrivals encountered the Dakota, in part via her ongoing stay. She underscored that it transcended archives. It housed folks pursuing active existences. The Dakota's imprint on mass media persisted. Movies and TV series often employed the structure's facade to capture the essence of New York City and set the scene. It popped up in numerous photos, films, and publications exploring the city's architectural heritage. Real estate pieces highlighted it as a prime illustration of Manhattan's elite residential spots. That blend of unique design, star-studded connections, and sorrowful backstory kept it captivating for outsiders who could only dream of stepping foot within. No one knew yet how structures like the Dakota would handle the need for significant repairs down the line. Eventually, perhaps far off in the years ahead, it could face renovations so thorough that residents would have to vacate temporarily. The co-op's governing body had been setting aside funds for such an event, though the expenses would skyrocket. Upgrading a Victorian-era edifice to meet modern, opulent expectations demanded funds that few resident associations could gather. The Dakota pulled it off thanks to the sky-high value of its units, giving owners compelling reasons to safeguard their stakes. Edward Clark's bold bet on the Upper West Side had far exceeded all forecasts. The edifice weathered early doubts over its site. It weathered financial downturns and global conflicts. It weathered shifts in design preferences. It weathered the shift to co-op ownership. It weathered its rise to fame. It weathered violence and loss. The Dakota persisted as residents continued selecting it, pouring money into it and affirming its value through upkeep. The bastion at 72nd Street remains upright. Its gateway still marks the shift from bustling avenue to secluded garden. Those sturdy barriers continue offering soundproofing for performers and seclusion for all inhabitants. The lofty rooms and inlaid wood flooring still summon visions of the opulent past. Today, it shelters creative souls right next to affluent households. Structures don't endure for 140 years without purpose. They endure when successive eras prioritize keeping them intact over tearing them down. The Dakota stood the test because sufficient residents saw merit in upholding a grand edifice raised amid untamed lands. Manhattan's iconic residence thrives not in spite of its years, but precisely due to them. Its tale presses on.